All right, so we're about 5 minutes in and we have a quorum. So if you all want to move forward with electing a chair and a vice chair, I'm happy to kind of get you started with that, and then whoever you elect can kind of take over from here. So are there any nominations for chair? Hi, Sarah.
I apologize for being late.
That's okay. We're everybody's gone very quiet or stayed very quiet when I asked if anybody wanted to nominate themselves or anyone else's chair.
I wanted to ask if anybody really wants to be chair. I think that's the way the question should be phrased. Do I hear a resounding cheers from the audience? No.
Any volunteers?
Peter, are you interested in being chair?
I'd be glad to.
And Sarah, would you like to be the vice chair?
I'm happy to be.
Well, there we are.
I move to elect Peter as chair and Sarah as vice chair.
I'll second the motion.
Because I can't elect Andy because he's not actually on the call. But yes, I will be happy to. So.
All in favor?
All right, Peter, I'll hand it to you to take over. One question I have for you, though, all of you, and this is something, Peter, you might want to put out to the group for a vote. Are you all happy with the Zoom format for these meetings, or would you like to move to a hybrid option?
I'm fine with Zoom. In fact, I think it's easier in a way with Zoom.
I prefer Zoom.
I agree.
I think you've got everybody's, confidence, and it's really going to be smoother if we just do things like everybody is used to. That would be great. So I don't think we need to vote on it. I mean, my goodness, we're all here. Can I make one little request to Audra and to your department heads is, and I know it's a pain for all of us, but the sooner you can get materials out to us before a particular Thursday, I think overall would be helpful. Of course, that's complicated and challenging, but this process has been on the books for a year, so it's nothing that it is, well, if we could simplify it and get it out to us, that way we can't have the excuse of, oh, I didn't see it. So anyway, that's just a suggestion. Let's see what we can do.
Yes, we'll endeavor to get you everything before time. It's difficult sometimes with presentations, but we will try our best to get it out ahead of time. All right.
So Audra, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little interesting if I'm the chair, but in essence, the first part of the meeting is for you to read your letter, right? I mean,
well, there is a little bit of there might be a little bit of housekeeping that you all want to do. Would you like me to screen share and pop up the agenda?
I have it right here.
Sure.
It
Sure.
says welcome and introductions.
Yeah.
So do you want to go through that, Peter, so everybody has a chance to introduce themselves?
That. Why don't we start with Janice?
Okay. Yep. Hi, everyone. This is Janice Easonsey at the town office. You can feel free to reach out to me anytime you need anything. I'll do what I can to get you what you need for your meetings. Nice to see you all again.
And Jody?
I am Jody Hanson. I'm the finance director for the town of Camden. And piggybacking on Janice, if you guys need any extra information, I am here Monday through Friday, phone call, email, whatever you need.
And Mr. Morrison?
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Morrison. I manage the Camden Opera House. I'm here tonight to deal with the part of the budget that has to do with the town offices, which shares a lot of expenses with the Opera House. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have. I don't have a presentation for the 0106. I will have one for the Opera House, and I just want to thank you all for your good work.
And Mr. Leichman?
I'm Kerry Lehman. I'm the assessor. I too thank you all for having me here and look forward to telling you all I can about assessing, and I'm also available anytime you want me.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jeremy?
Hello, everybody.
Knows.
Jeremy Martin, I'm the Planning and Development Director for the town and oversee code and planning functions. So as always, I'm here for to answer any questions of you and from anyone else as well. So feel free to stop by, send me an email, or give me a call anytime.
So why don't we go through, Pamela, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, some of us were on the budget committee last year and some were not. I think that's going to be interesting and helpful. So go ahead, Pamela.
I'm Pamela Gleason. I live on Harrison Avenue. I am an environmental designer, landscape architect. And last year was my first year on the budget committee. So I was a newbie last year and just learning a lot about, where our tax dollars go and how everything is spent in town, and what the departments do. So glad to be here again. Thank you.
Good. No, Jill Delano.
I'm Jill Delano. I was on the committee last year. It was my first year. I've lived at my house on McGonagall Street for 25 years now, and I'm a real estate broker at Camden Real Estate. And I'm delighted to serve with all of you. So I look forward to this process. Thanks.
And Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Jones. I live on Thomas Street. I'm a full-time working artist from my home. Before that, I was a town employee for 21 years for the town of Camden, and this is my third year on the budget committee.
And Wendy.
I'm Wendy Rich. I live on Pearl Street. This is my third and final year on the committee. I'm continuing to learn. This is definitely not my daily job at all. So I learn something new every time we get together. I am a pediatric physical therapist. So.
And Mary Winchell.
Yes, hi. I live on Sherman's Point Road. This is my third year on the budget committee, and I've lived in Camden since 2010.
Thank you. And Nancy.
Yes, I'm another McGonagall Street representative. We are heavily dominant on the budget committee. And I was born and raised in Camden and have not lived here all my life. I think I'm what they call a boomerang, somebody who goes away and comes back. But I want to say that one of the great pleasures for me in serving on the budget committee is an attempt to get into town business in a way that we really don't do so much in town meeting anymore, especially when town meeting has to be so dispersed and so devoted to Zoom and so forth. So it's a great opportunity to find out what's going on and how we can help to make it better.
Thank you. Awesome. And Sarah.
Yep. Hello, Sarah Scrivenic. This is my second year on the committee. Andy Scrivenic, who's also on the committee, but he's actually because of the committee last year he became a volunteer Camden firefighter and is now attending additional training these evenings. So that was what's done from. We've been in Camden about 9 years. I'm currently calling you from my childhood home in Queens because I've just taken my daughter for the first time to see my parents since pre-COVID. So we landed about 2 hours ago. So we're having time here. I work in clinical research, primarily in the regulatory quality operational assessments for companies that support clinical trials. And I do that above my 2-car garage in Camden or out of state. So I appreciate the Zoom calls. So.
Wow, thank you. And last but not least, Caitlin.
Hi, I'm actually the assistant assessor, always assisting Kerry Lehman, the assessor. So if anybody needs anything, let me know.
Now, can I ask a technical question in the assessor's department?
Sure.
Or we share Kerry with Rockport. Is that right?
Yes.
And Caitlin as well.
Yep.
And both of you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I can't wait to learn about that.
How about you, Peter?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's Peter Lindquist, married to Sarah, live on Chestnut Street, volunteered out at the Snow Bowl for many years. Let's see, I'm going to become a bus driver. So I'll be working with some of your children or some of your grandchildren or some of your neighbors' children. So it's always interesting what we get involved in, but this is great. We have a good group of people here, and I appreciate everybody's effort. So thank you. And that should get us to where our we know who we're working with. I mean, looking at this agenda, Audra, most of this is for you to kick off, and I don't know of much else that I can offer at this point. I mean, I go back to your letter. I don't think you want to read it to us, but it's our start, right?
Yep. So I'll and we have the benefit of having an experienced budget committee this year. You've all served at least a year. And you've probably noticed this is the much smaller committee than last year, and that's due to the recent charter changes that were approved as a result of the work of the Charter Commission. So that's a big difference from last year. So since a lot of you, kind of went through the introductory information with me, I'm gonna go through it, fairly quickly. So it's not too redundant for most of you. So I'm going to start sharing my screen right now so that we can just go through the presentation. Let's see if I can make this full screen. All right. So we've already done welcome and introductions. Thank you, Peter. Roles and responsibilities. So you're all here primarily to do the major review of the budget and make a recommendation to the select board, particularly on the general fund budget. A big part of that is reading materials provided. And like we discussed in the beginning, I will certainly make sure that you have as much material in advance as possible. If there's anything that you feel like you need that you don't have prior to a meeting, feel free to reach out to myself, Janice, Jody. We'll get it, additional supplemental materials and make sure that the entire committee gets them. So even if one person asks for them, we'll try to make sure that we get it to everybody else as well. Please ask questions, before meetings if you feel like that would be helpful for your review as you go through information. A big thing that, I find it, I'm doing it all the time, and I'm sure that, you'll hear staff kind of using jargon as they go through the budget. If there's anything that we're saying, we're using acronyms or we're using a term that isn't familiar to you, please feel free to call us out, because you certainly won't be the only one who might not know what the acronym is. So don't ever feel embarrassed to call us out on using municipal jargon that is every day to us, but not necessarily to the rest of the world. Coming to meetings prepared, and if there are certain rules of order that you all agree on, just making sure that we stay consistent with that. And oh, sorry, Peter, do you have a comment about that one?
I just want to add, I'm sorry to interrupt, Audra, because this is great, about using jargon and about not rules of order, but I find that when many times internally in a town or a municipality, they refer to a department as it's like the code enforcement office or the assessor's office. Well, it's Kerry's office, or it's Jeremy's office. Well, I want to remind all of the budget committee people that are here working that it is the assessor's office, and it's the opera house, and it's the finance office, it's the Parks and Recreation Department. It is not a personality ownership office. They're employees. Kerry is an employee of the town, as you are, Audra. But it's just many times when you talk or you hear people, it just drives me nuts to hear it's so-and-so's office. Well, it really isn't, because they were, anyway, does that make sense? Thank you.
Great. So next, and I talked about this last year, so I won't go over it too much, but really, what you're doing is incredibly important, because this is sort of the bedrock foundational policy that the town sets each and every year. So it lays out what services we're going to provide, to what extent we're going to provide them, and how they're going to be funded ultimately. So, everything that comes from the budget ultimately impacts every citizen within the town of Camden. So just, can't emphasize enough how important, budget is, and how important it is to have all of you involved in the process. So again, went through this again. The budget, it's more than just an accounting document to help us sort of record and control expenses. We're also, using it to manage different departments by determining, how many positions we're able to hire, what kinds of goods and services we're able to purchase throughout the year. It helps with decision making. So, there is a little bit of flexibility within a budget document, but it does set really important parameters for both the select board and the town staff. And also it's helpful with communications, because it informs the public of how their money is being spent. So again, like I said, budget committee, you're an incredibly important committee to the town. So it's really important to have citizen feedback on the levels of service and what sort of projects and policies you want us to focus our attention on in the upcoming year. And, sometimes we have really great conversations about the budget for the upcoming financial year that maybe it isn't something that can be implemented in this financial year, but it does set us up to have a bigger discussion around it in future years. And I remember there was a really good conversation, I think it was with the FY21 budget in terms of fire services, that helped kick off a larger discussion about regionalization and fire-based EMS, and something that is taking a few years to work on. But I think that a lot of the feedback that we got from the budget committee that year was really helpful in sort of kicking that off and demonstrating that this was an issue that budget committee members and the broader citizenry in the community really cared about. So I think that that's really important to keep in mind, is that, sometimes it takes a long time to move certain departments in a certain direction or certain policy priorities in a certain direction. But, we really take the feedback that we receive through this process seriously. And even if it isn't implemented right away in this financial year, it can be really important down the line. So we have a line item budget, and you're all very familiar with this because you've seen it before. So it basically connects and reports information by different cost centers and groups them together. It's great for a lot of oversight and control over the budget, but it's not incredibly flexible. So there can be times where things change throughout the financial year, because really a budget is sort of an estimate at this point in time, and preparing one sort of 6 months before you have to implement it can be difficult. So sometimes that's our biggest challenge. And I can, that's when I talk about sort of the challenges in preparing the budget for this financial year, sort of the unknowns going into it and some of the additional information that keeps coming our way is really kind of important. So I'm not going to go into this because you're familiar with this and you've all looked at it before and how it's kind of laid out and the information that you see from the past. So the sections, the budget message, so that's the letter that I write. The net commitment is sort of it gives an idea of what all the, bottom line expenses and revenues are going to be. The summary, similar to that, revenues, all of the non-tax-based revenues that we're expecting or anticipating in the upcoming financial year. The general fund, that's basically all of the major expenses that you'll be reviewing. Debt service is all of the past debt that was approved and our yearly payments on both principal and interest for that. Capital improvements and reserves. So the capital improvements, they tend to be, and the focus is going to be a little bit different this year, and I'll explain it later, but that's, either equipment or projects that we're planning to do this financial year, whereas the reserves are like the broader categories that we're trying to put away money for various different purposes. And we have 2 special revenue funds, and they sit outside the general fund budget. So these do not get approved by voters, and the budget committee, you'll review them and provide a recommendation to the select board, who ultimately has final approval on them. And that's the snowball budget and the wastewater department's budget. So I won't go into the budget message because you're all familiar with that. So net commitment summarizes the total amount of funds that need to be raised through taxes. So the summary, that's just the total expenses, total revenues, and we also add in our assessment from Midcoast Solid Waste because they have their budget prepared prior to the towns, so that we have that number when we're doing our budget prep. So the revenues, all non-property tax-based revenues. So example, the vehicle excise tax will be in there. Any other fees for service that we charge. So that's things like building permits, revenue that comes in through the town clerk's office, harbor revenue. And when we use other sources of funding, like our tax increment financing proceeds. So we talked about that a lot last year, but I can always, update everybody on that again if you'd like a refresher later on, because we're going to use a larger amount of that this year than we did in past financial years. Also the surplus, which sometimes we call the unassigned fund balance. So those are all, and if we were going to, raise any money through leases or bonds or other financing sources, that would go in the revenue section of the budget as well. So those are all things that are sources of funds that we bring in that do not come from property taxes. So in the general fund, all the day-to-day operating expenses are there. So payroll, benefits, any supplies that we use, fuel, electricity, equipment purchases, and smaller maintenance items. So capital reserves, improvements in debt. So this is where we try to put all the major purchases, and it's kind of come to a point where I would say, it's more in the realm of $20,000 and over, or the types of purchases that we would put there. So any new major equipment, any new buildings that the town might be looking at building, or major sort of maintenance projects for those buildings, and also major infrastructure projects. So this year, there's going to be more of a focus on capital reserves as opposed to capital improvements, because we're finding that more and more often sort of major capital improvement projects are spanning over a number of financial years. And to sort of keep carrying those expenses forward is not really, it's not a very great practice. So it's a better practice to find an appropriate capital reserve account, put funds away in that if we need to do a project over a number of financial years. So that'll be sort of reflected in this budget, and I'll explain it as we go through it. So this will be something that we talk about a lot, because certain departments, on top of their operational budget, they'll be making requests for capital equipment or for certain projects. And so to kind of be able to link that back to the operational budgets for different departments, I'll refer back to some of the capital reserves improvements or debt areas. So to go into a little bit of detail about capital improvements. So I've really tried to keep it to just items this year that we know that we're going to be able to purchase. Like if it's, a vehicle, or if it's a project that we know is ready to go this particular financial year. We don't have a lot of projects that we're looking to finance this year. So it's this area of the budget's been skinnied up this year. So for capital reserves, so we set aside funds for future use here. So there's a number of different reasons why we would do that. So like I said, if it's a project that we know it's going to span a few financial years, we'll put it here. And so I think a good example of that is the bridge, the pedestrian bridge for Morrison Avenue. So I'm not sure if you all recall, last year we put half of our, it's going to be a grant matched project with MDOT. So we put half of our match in a reserve account in FY22, the current financial year that we're in. And so this financial year, we'll put the second half of that matching contribution in. So we'll have the entire match that we need to accomplish that project. But that's sort of an example of something that's spanning a number of financial years where we had to, build up the money to be able to do the project. But we also use it for things like funding incremental improvements. I think the storm drain reserve has been a really good example of this. So that's something where, you have a major infrastructure system. You can't necessarily do every single repair to that system all at once. So we try to, set aside money every year so that we're able to do, improvements every year as well. And also setting aside money for emergency purposes, like our winter maintenance reserve. So for debt service, this is where you can find most major capital expenses, both past and if there were going to be any that we propose for this financial year, which we're not, they would show up as something that's, going to be requiring debt service payments. So they're split out into both principal and interest on, whether it be a lease, loan, or a bond. So that can run the gamut from something like, the tannery demolition or building a new building when we acquired all of our streetlights and converted them to LEDs, as well as like major equipment purchases such as, dump trucks, fire trucks, that sort of thing. So this is one thing I think it's really important to look at, particularly, with the long view, not just on a year-to-year basis, but keeping in mind the broader picture of what we're doing over the next 10, 20, 30 years, because, what we do in one financial year is certainly going to impact us into the future. So, looking at our sort of, debt and trying to keep it as level as possible, I think that's a really good goal. So, I'll talk a lot about when we have debt retiring and those being sort of the years that we need to look to for planning for bigger projects that we might want to do. And We did retire a little bit of debt this year, but really that's sort of been kind of taken up already with the recent energy efficiency upgrades that we've done to buildings. So I think when we're kind of doing our capital planning for the future right now, we're looking really at FY 25 and 27 when we have some pretty significant debt retiring. So the special revenue funds, like we've talked about, it's the wastewater department as well as the snow bowl. And with these, really the revenue that we bring in needs to meet or exceed the expenses for running those different departments. So, you know, we'll send you the snow bowl and the wastewater budgets fairly soon. And, you know, ultimately, like I said, they're approved by the select board, but your review of them and your recommendations and understanding of them is really important as well. So things that we'll talk about fairly frequently. So tax increment financing districts or TIF districts. So we have 2 in the town of Camden. One we could stand to get rid of as soon as we're able to get around to it. We have one for the downtown area. So they stretch out over sort of a defined geographic area. And when the TIF district goes into effect, it's sort of like the old value or the old original tax assessed value is frozen, and any new increase of value is the revenue that's sort of collected and set aside for specific purposes in that particular district. So I forgot to change this. So that currently our downtown TIF district generates about $140,000 a year. And this is set aside for specific projects that were identified in the development program that was done back in 2010. So we've used it for a lot of those projects like downtown pedestrian improvements, when we upgraded all the streetlights in town, the year-to-year lease purchase that we're doing of the Knox Mill and Knowlton Street parking lots. Those are the sorts of things that are consistent with what was identified in the development program. And you know, given some of the changes in values that we're experiencing across the town this year, it's very likely that our downtown TIF district is going to generate a lot more in proceeds this year. So, you know, we have the opportunity to use that to offset some of our other expenses that are consistent with the development program. And we also have a highway TIF district, which is currently not generating a lot of revenue, so we haven't been able to use it to fund any projects. So another thing we talk about is the surplus, or sometimes we refer to it as the unassigned fund balance. So it's currently, and I should have updated this number, it's we're looking at about 4 million, so it's a little bit less than what I have on this slide. So the best practice with this is to have enough funding to sustain our operations for 2 months. And we're looking at, you know, probably about 2 million for our purposes. So we continue to have a very healthy unassigned fund balance. So just a good thing to keep in mind as we go through the budget process. And I'll talk about retiring debt a lot, and I've already explained that. So Kerry is gonna, when he does his presentation, he'll go into this in much more detail and much more eloquently than I could ever explain it. But this is sort of an overview of how, you know, the mill rate is calculated, because I know that's something that, you know, everybody wants to be, you know, very aware of when you're going through the budgeting process. So it's, you know, just important to keep in mind that, you know, you look at sort of the total amount that needs to be raised by not just the town, but also the schools and the county, and the total, you know, value of real estate and personal property in the town. And that's how you come up with the calculation of the mill rate. And currently our mill rate is $15.35 per $1,000 of value. So this is sort of how it breaks down. And this is the distribution of, you know, what the money that needs to be raised by taxpayers is currently spent on. And this sort of gives you an idea of, for our purposes and what we're doing here, what we would have to do in terms of either reducing spending or increasing revenues to have impacts on the mill rate. All right. So we talked about this a little bit last year, but I think it's kind of important because this is something that we're continuing to live with the impacts of COVID-19. And I think it was, really good questions when we were all first, a lot of you, I think, were here during the budget process for FY20 when, we were all kind of realizing that COVID-19 was serious and was going to change things quite dramatically. It was, a lot of unknowns at that time when we were preparing the budget. And, it was really interesting to sort of come back to the group of you a year later and be able to talk about what we actually saw. So, we found that our property tax collection rate is tracking very similarly this year as it was in our last 2 financial years. Interestingly, vehicle excise tax continues to go up. So it's up, 26% from FY20 compared to now. Boat excise tax, that's up almost 30%. So we're starting to, also notice an increase in the collection of administrative fees through the clerk's office. And the most, I guess, kind of shocking increase, and this is something that Jeremy will speak to during his presentation about the impact on the codes planning and development office, is that we're just seeing huge increases in building, plumbing, electrical permits, and they're up 60% from the past financial years. So we did have a few areas where there were some losses in revenue, and the Opera House experienced that, of course, because they couldn't have as many shows or admit as many people. So they did see an impact, but Dave and his staff have been really savvy about that, and they applied for a shuttered venue operators grant, and they've received some revenue from that to kind of offset some of the losses that we experienced. And like I said before, harbor, snowball, codes, planning and development, they've all seen increases. So another thing that we'll talk about as we go through this, and this is something new and something that some of you might have heard about. Camden's receiving close to $500,000, or maybe a little over $500,000 as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And there's more flexibility than there seemed to be in the beginning as to how those funds can be used. So it'll be interesting to kind of talk about, your thoughts on that. And we've proposed a project, but certainly looking for feedback on that. So we currently have about $250,000 sitting in a reserve account of our first half of those funds, and the second half we'll receive in FY23. So some of the challenges that we've experienced, and this is not going to be unfamiliar to any of you. So all the cost of goods and services are increasing, fuel, electricity, any sort of building materials and services that come along with, basically any function or anything that we want to do that requires any sort of contracting or labor. So, one thing to keep in mind as we go through this, things like energy savings that we are hoping to see from performance contracting have really been neutralized by increases in electricity and fuel costs. And I don't think, the point I'm making is not to say that the town shouldn't have done that, because think of, what the increases would have looked like for us otherwise, but it's more of, the sort of decreases in expenses that we were hoping to see. We're not really seeing them at all. It's more of a flat line between past financial years and this financial year. Also payroll increases. I'm proposing a 5.9% cost of living adjustment for employee retention and attraction purposes. So, you know, we talked about this last year where there was no proposed cost of living adjustment from the Social Security office. And so we did, basically with the exception of the police department who had a collective bargaining agreement, we did a 0% cost of living adjustment last year. So, you know, the idea is if we're using the Social Security numbers as our benchmark, that's sort of what was happening at the time of preparing this budget. Now we're looking at more like a 7.2% increase, and that, you know, has a lot to do with inflationary pressures. So that's, you know, that's the rationale behind, you know, that proposed increase. But it's been really challenging for everyone with the labor market that we have, and with, you know, some of the, you know, movement that we're seeing in wages with surrounding municipalities and private sector employees in, you know, certain areas. So we're also on the final year of a 3-year plan for altering the step and grades across the organization. So last year we did the fire department, parks and recreation, as well as the opera house. This year is for year 3, it will be administration, codes, planning and development, harbor, and also the police department. And that really falls in line with the expiration of their 3-year collective bargaining agreement. And also one of the other things, we need to build up reserve funds in anticipation of some of those capital projects that we're hoping to bring online in the upcoming financial years. And one thing I didn't include in this presentation, but it's certainly been a challenge, is that, you know, we're really not alone in, you know, some of the unpredictability in the market in terms of, you know, inflation and you know, the labor market. So it's been really difficult from some of the external organizations that we rely on for budget numbers to, you know, get information from them that sort of fits with our timeframes for when we need to have the budget ready. So for example, today I had a meeting with our representatives from Maine Water, who explained to me that there was going to be a 3.4% increase in water rates. And so they were giving me that information, which is going to impact our hydrant assessment, specifically for the town. There'll be absolutely other impacts on ratepayers. But, you know, it just has meant that we need to be a little bit more dynamic as we sort of review the budget, because I'm going to have to make changes as we go. And it's similar with like our contract for EMS services, where they just haven't been able to, you know, give me the contract for the upcoming year prior to me preparing this budget and sending it out to all of you folks. So, you know, I'll be getting updated and new information in certain areas as we go along. So some of the things that we can look to help, you know, offset some of the, you know, increases that we see, or some of the more challenging issues that we're going to need to work through as we do the budget. So our health insurance increases are minimal this year. Last year they were 0%. This year they're 1%. So last year they really, the health trusts that we're a member of, they really wanted to hold the line on premium increases. This year we were pretty lucky. We just moved, we kind of hit the threshold where we're part of 25% of the town's experience is factored into calculating our premium. So it used to be that we're just kind of thrown in the entire Maine Municipal Association pool. And so 100% of our premium reflected what the entire pool's, you know, premium increases were. But because we're over 50 employees that are on Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust health insurance plans, they're factoring in 25% of the experience experience of town staff, with 75% of the broader MMA pool. And because our staff have been healthy over the past couple of years, it's made our premium increases pretty minimal. So that was to our benefit this year. So another thing we can look to is utilizing the town's surplus, our very healthy surplus, to help reduce the tax burden. And I got some really good feedback from all of you last year about that. So I've tried to, really incorporate that in the budget this year to, make sure that, we're doing what we can to, bring in a bottom line increase that's as low as possible. Same thing with the downtown TIF revenue. So we're projecting to see, much more in TIF proceeds as a result of increasing value in the district. So, we can use that money much more aggressively, but appropriately on projects that are identified in the development program. Also, targeted and specific reserve funds, using those to help fund some of our capital projects. A good example being the harbor reserve for some float replacement. And, really being sort of careful about our level of investment in capital projects this year, and focusing on sort of building up reserves for projects that we don't want to fund with debt service, but we might need to stretch them across more than one, financial year. And also keeping our eye on what our debt service is and when debt is retiring, and just sort of being prepared and mindful of when those years are coming, so that we have projects that are ready to go, but we're not taking that debt on early to a point where, it's going to cause a bump in the mill rate. So if you look at sort of the breakdown of the different cost areas and expenses, this is what it looks like. Public safety sort of continues to be our biggest cost center, but that's followed closely by general government, and then, things like the public works, and followed by parks and recreation and leisure services. And health and welfare looks really small in the Camden budget. And a lot of that is because we're fortunate to have a number of trust funds that we can draw from to provide assistance to people in the community that need it. So not a lot of those expenses come out of the general fund. So if you look at sort of the difference between this financial year and last, the biggest single item is, wages, Social Security, and that has to do with, like I was saying, the cost of living adjustment. We're going to propose the addition of a new position, which we'll talk about in more detail when we get to that part of the budget. Also, the progressive wage reclassification. So this is the last year of that three-phased approach that we took. And also, the fire department and trying to increase part-time wages, as well as make sure that call division people, can sort of expect sort of a minimum hourly rate. A little bit in health insurance. Even though it's only a 1% increase for this financial year, the way that it stretches across, it's really 6 months. So we just conservatively budget for that at more of a 5% rate in case the second half of the year ends up being higher. A little bit in retirement, because we need to match the main public retirement system contributions. We've had some increases in the general government area. So again, that's if looking back to sort of payroll, we've had an increase in our insurance from our workers' comp premium. Also with the IT area, there's increases in the amount of software we're purchasing and the licensing associated with that. And also just expenses around, operating the town office portion of this building. So the public safety, a lot of their increases were due to payroll. So, we've talked about fire department, but it's going to be the first year of a new collective bargaining agreement for the police department. And we had to do a lot of work to make the police department's wages competitive, because we were really falling behind agencies within the mid-coast area. highway, streets and bridges. So that's where a lot of, our public works department sits. So they've had some increases in payroll costs, but also looking at the cost of materials and equipment. That's all, stuff that's going up, and we need to keep pace with that. So there was a small increase in the health and welfare area because of some community service provider requests. And these are the types of requests that we can't use trust funds on, but they do provide a valuable service to the community. So that's, things like the Watershed Association, the American Legion, Garden Club, those sorts of organizations that, that's not necessarily the welfare side of things, but they do things for the community that are important. So leisure services, we've seen a little almost $84,000 increase, a lot of that due to payroll and equipment and grounds maintenance. Those are areas that, particularly grounds maintenance, that we need to focus on a little bit more this year. So in the debt service area, we've seen a total of about a $53,000 decrease, and that's coming down to the retirement of debt. We should say second year of financing our energy efficiency upgrades to town buildings. So capital reserves, I'm increasing to, as I was talking about before, focus on this a lot more and setting aside funds for future capital projects and equipment purchases, and a pretty big corresponding decrease in the capital improvement program. So there's, fewer projects that we believe that we can actually get accomplished in FY23. So instead of kind of carrying those over into upcoming financial years, we wanted to focus more on setting money aside in capital reserve accounts. So if you look at revenues, we're projected to see, and we did see an increase in revenue sharing already this financial year, but the state government, they're proposing to fund revenue sharing to the 5% level. And if we kind of look at the amount of money we collected in revenue sharing to date this financial year, and even looking back a year, I think we can conservatively say that we're going to make at least 125,000 more in that line. Licenses, permits, and fees, that's about a $500,000 increase. So like I said, the huge rise in the amount of fees that we're collecting from building, plumbing, electrical permit fees, as well as continue to see an excise tax. Cable franchise fees are not really changing that much, but that's part of that mix as well. And we're going to use a little bit more in reserve funds. That's a little bit deceiving because it's ARPA funds for a project that I'll talk about with you when we get to that part of the budget, but also trying to offset the expenses of some capital equipment purchases. All right, now before I get into the section where we go through employee benefits, did anybody have any questions? No?
I do.
Oh, sorry.
I had such a hard time last year understanding these darn TIF funds. That you said $140,000 yearly. Who is paying that money? Is it the downtown businessmen or property owners, or what? That's where it's coming from.
Yes.
I don't hear any rumbling from them about why should we pay for this, or
no, because they see it as it's all part of their property taxes.
I see.
It's just like a portion of their property taxes that's set aside for specific projects.
Okay. All right.
And there's and Nancy, it's a really good question of, like who's paying for it. I'll bring or I'll send to everyone a map of the TIF district so you can see which properties are in it.
Great. That's a very good
idea. That. So any other questions? All right, so I will move on to just getting into employee benefits. So a lot of, decisions around benefits and what's offered and why is set out in the personnel policy. So that identifies, insurance and retirement benefits. With police officers, it's a little bit different. That's all set out in the collective bargaining agreement that's negotiated every 3 years with the town. And like I said, that this will be the first year of a new collective bargaining agreement. So the select board has the authority to sort of review the level of employee contributions to things like health insurance and choose our insurance carrier. So if you look at this impact on the budget this year, so this is sort of the 1,097,800. That's the cost in dollars to the town for employee health insurance. And that accounts for about 10.6% of the municipal budget. So retirement, almost 350,000, 3.3%. And then wages, FICA, Medicare, all those payroll deductions, 3.8 million. And that's about, to round up, 37% of the budget. So for health insurance, and I'll go through this quickly because again, all of you have sort of been through this spiel before. Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust is our provider, and they offer 3 choices of plan, or they have more than 3 choices, but we only offer 3 of the Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust plans. So the way that it's sort of broken down is full-time eligible employees who were hired before 2007, 100% of their contribution to their plans is covered by the town. And anybody hired after 2007, the town covers 100% of their benefits and then 80% of dependents. And if people are part-time, so they work at least 20 hours, but less than 30, they can buy the town's health insurance, but they have to pay for it at their own expense. So part of this, also a group life insurance. This is just part of the health insurance plan as well. And for retirement, we give employees the choice of contributing to the Maine Public Employee Retirement System or through the International City Managers Association. And if employees choose Maine Public Employees Retirement, the employee has to contribute 7.6% and the town has to contribute 10.2%. And ICMA, that's a 5% payroll deduction that's required and a 5% match by the town. So we also offer vision, dental, income protection, and supplemental insurance, but the premiums are paid 100% by the employee. We just do the, the payroll deduction and pay the companies through that. So we have, 3 different plans, as I was talking about before. So the majority of town employees choose the first plan. It provides the highest level of coverage and is the highest cost. And it's also the plan that seems to be the most steady in terms of the premium. So the cheaper plans, we've seen more movement in them over the years where we've had bigger premium increases on a year-to-year basis. Whereas the POSC plan, it always tends to stay pretty steady. Rarely do we see an increase that's, over 5%. So the Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust, it's a self-funded health trust. It's structured as a multiple employers contribute to it, and it's regulated by the Maine Bureau of Insurance. So trust is a third-party administrator, and it pays claims, and it has all the financial responsibility for this. And so we have a group of about 450 employers that get pooled in. Their liability is all pooled as part of this. And it has a reinsurance program as well. So they also, the vision, life and supplemental insurances you know, we can offer them and, you know, they help out with that. But like I said before, we have employees pay that premium. So they're much like any other insurance firm, they work with an actuarial and they look at the past 24 months to project future costs, and they adjust the claims by, you know, different trends and set premiums accordingly. And we're no longer part of a pooled group. So we used to be in a pooled group. So 100% of, you know, what our premium was projected to be was based on, you know, the experience of everybody that was part of Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust's pool of 450 municipalities. But now that we have more than 50 employees covered, they look at 25% of the town's experience. So that's, you know, claims that were made by our specific employees. And this is our first year being part of the rated group, and it's actually worked to our benefit. So the health trust is pretty fiscally conservative. They do try to reserve a safety margin in case there's, you know, higher claims for the upcoming year, but they, you know, they do a really good job keeping rates pretty steady. So I kind of haven't updated these numbers in years, and I asked for this a long time ago just to give you all an idea of, you know, being part of a bigger pool of, you know, 450 other employers and mixed in with everybody's experiences, you know, given us the benefit of being able to have, you know, more predictable premiums with, you know, less volatility on a year in, year out basis, as opposed to, you know, if we were to go it alone and you know, look at other plans. And these are just sort of examples of, you know, other municipalities or counties or quasi-municipal organizations that, you know, did just that and have received kind of pretty huge increases in on a year in, year out basis. So that just sort of explains all of that. So generally with employee benefits, you know, good health insurance has been really, really important for Camden and retaining existing employees and also attracting new employees. You know, I've been able to, you know, recruit a lot of very experienced staff because we have a good benefits package. So that's been, you know, really important to us, particularly over the last couple of years. As we experience a labor shortage. And this is only being compounded by the pandemic. You know, there's more competition than we've ever experienced for good people. And, you know, having good benefits has been really important to keeping us competitive. And it's the same thing with, you know, competitive wages. So it's really given Camden a good reputation as a great employer that has, you know, puts a high value on our employees. And I think that's something, you know, as a town that we should be really proud of and, you know, really appreciate the support from, you know, citizens in helping us to be able to maintain that over the years. So I think that's it for that. Any questions on benefits, wages? Peter?
So I went on the town's website. I could not seem to find a copy, but the employee manual, the town's employee manual, where do I find that?
The personnel policy?
Yep, yep.
I don't know if we have it. Janice, do we have that on the website anywhere?
It is not on.
Could I get a?
Yeah, I'll send everybody a copy.
Yeah.
I think that would be very helpful.
Yep, happy to. And I'll send that. And I think that there's a few appendices that are specific to what I just talked about that would be helpful as well. And I can send those through. Sarah?
I may be incorrect, but was last year the year that there's like a shift and a new plan had been adopted for the healthcare? I'm recalling like if it had been bid out to different groups. Was that last year that a new plan was put into place from the health benefits, or have I made up my own tale?
Oh, yeah, we didn't bid out a new plan. I think it was in 2018 when Jody and I first started.
Okay.
We started shopped it around a little bit and,
okay,
kind of looked at other places that had done it.
Okay.
So yeah, that I think that's what we talked about
a few years prior. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, so I promise that this is going to be pretty much the last from me. I'm going to go through the admin and finance budget, and then you get to hear somebody else talk other than me. So let me just see if I can find that. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting the one up I want to show you. Okay. Can everyone see that? Great. All right. Marlene would be so upset if she saw she was the very first person. So, so page 1 of your budget book is the administration, finance and clerk's office. And so I'm just gonna go over that as well as, a few other areas that are part of that budget before I turn it over to some of the other department heads that are joining us tonight. So we did this last year, but I'll go through it again just to kind of refresh everyone. So a lot of that department's budget comes down to the wages and payroll. And, the person who sort of keeps track of that across the entire organization sits in that department, and that's Marlene. And she's one of our longest serving employees. She's been here 33 years. So Marlene is the deputy finance director, but she's also designated as the treasurer for the town. So she's responsible for weekly payroll, all of our accounts payable. She does all the sort of quarterly and annual state and federal reporting. She's also, responsible for a lot of the HR functions out of the town that relate to payroll and employee benefits. And, she does all the processing of accounts payable for both the general fund as well as the snow bowl and wastewater department. And she provides clerical support to the cemetery association. She's also Jody's backup person. So if Jody gets to go on vacation, Marlene is there backing her up. Katrina is our town clerk. She's been with the town for 20 years as of this year. So I'm sure, all of you who've come into the town office have met Katrina. She's the registrar of voters and is the person who oversees all of the elections and special town meetings and anytime anybody's sworn into office here. She is the deputy tax collector and treasurer, and as part of her town clerk responsibilities, she oversees all the vital records as well as dog licenses, and all of that has a state reporting requirement. And just the sort of general customer service, so phone calls, front counter, and other customer relations. Katrina does that, and she's excellent at it. She's really great at elections, so she's a real asset to us. Liz is a 9-year employee with the town, so she provides backup to Katrina when it comes to elections. She's as the tax collector responsible for collecting property and excise tax, and working with the assessing office to finalize tax commitments. She also does all of the lien filings and discharges. So if, we have like a tax lien that's matured on a property, it goes over to Liz, and that can get quite complicated. So she's the backup for Marlene as well as the treasurer, and the backup for Katrina in terms of town clerk responsibilities. Liz is also the harbor clerk, so all the harbor permitting, billing, collections, and assignment of moorings, and just keeping track of, any licenses and agreements that we have there. And Liz also has a customer service responsibility. So Kendall is a 4-year employee with the town, and she is the deputy register of voters, as well as tax collector, treasurer, town clerk, and general customer service. So she provides a lot of, backup to both Liz and Katrina, as well as Marlene. And a huge part of what she does, though, is, support for the codes and planning office, and, data entry and that kind of work. So very public facing, but also doing a lot of behind the scenes work for different departments across the town. And this is Jody. Jody's our finance director. So she provides just a lot of assistance to me with the development of the budget and just the day-to-day management of our finance office, as well as our investment accounts, and overseeing just general revenues and reserves. And there's just a lot that Jody does in the finance office, and she, on top of that, is the bookkeeper for Midcoast Solid Waste and provides backup to Marlene in all of the accounts payable and payroll functions when Marlene is out of the office or has other responsibilities. This is Janice. A lot of you know Janice as well. This is her 20th year with the town too. So again, all of these people, they just do so much. It's hard to summarize it in bullet points, but Janice is responsible for a lot of the coordination and communication with the departments, helping with the committees and the select board. She takes a lot of calls, helps with written correspondence. She helps to administer the town's website. Janice prepares a lot of our public hearing notices and advertising and other, information that needs to go out publicly, either, by traditional or new media. She administers all of the business licensing for the town of Camden. And she's the person who does a lot of the record keeping in relation to ordinances and ordinance amendments, which is just in and of itself a huge job to make sure that everything is up to date. She helps with the preparation of the budget with me and Jody as well. She's the person who assembles the annual town report, and she does a lot of our work when we need to file insurance claims to make sure that they're prepared, and then, following up with our carriers. And she is just a huge help to me with the preparation and distribution of all of the select board agendas and packets every other week. So this is me. I've worked for the town for 5 years now. So I'm the chief administrative officer for the town. I oversee all the departments. I, provide the coordination between our administrative functions as well as the policy making arm of the town, which is the select board. I'm ultimately responsible for the capital planning and budget preparation, as well as all municipal facilities and the construction and maintenance of all town infrastructure. So, whether it be, something in public works or another department, ultimately I'm where the buck stops in terms of responsibility. So I advise both the select board and town meeting on the development of policy. So if there's, questions, if they're technical in nature or just, a sounding board for the development of policy, I try my very best to answer questions, and I'm also responsible for the implementation of ordinances and other policies. So that's the administration and finance office and who staffs it and what's in that page of the budget. So if we go to page 3 of our budget books, that's the professional services area. And so within that, one of the most important functions is our general legal services. So Bill Kelly is the town's attorney, and he's been our legal counsel since 2001. So we used to have a agreement with the city of Belfast to share Bill, but he retired from the city of Belfast, but has stayed with the town of Camden. So now we're on a fixed rate contract with Bill. So it's the same financial impact to the town of Camden as when we were cost sharing with Belfast. But it's kind of a different arrangement just in terms of, we're not paying for the entire cost of Bill's salary and benefits and then getting reimbursed by Belfast. It's just a fixed rate that's right there in the budget. So Bill is responsible for providing all the legal opinions on matters relating to the town, and he is our legal counsel for any civil suits or actions and proceedings that are authorized by the select board. And if there's any suit brought against the town, he's our legal defense, and he oversees other sort of if we're going to develop a new ordinance or ordinance amendment, it all goes through Bill's review to make sure that's in compliance with statute. And he does a lot of other work in terms of, agreements, contracts, and that kind of work with the town. And he provides support to other groups such as the planning board and the ZBA. If there's an issue where they need legal advice, Bill will represent the town. All right, so in addition to our general legal services, we have a line for bond counsel. We haven't allocated any funds for FY23 because we're not proposing to finance any projects. So we did not need to budget for bond counsel this year. We've, budget a little bit in funds for court fees, and there's a little bit set aside for other legal services that we might need, whether it be the planning board or the zoning board of appeals. And also within the professional services budget, we have a general engineering fund. So that could be projects that pop up throughout the financial year that sit outside a department or a specific project that we might need to, seek engineering services for. So if you go to page 6 of your budget, that has the information technology area. So in the IT budget, we have our service contract for general IT support that we receive through Harbor Digital. It's also where all of our licensing for software sits. So this year we have a few things that are a little bit new. Some of them we did talk about last year and did budget for last year, but we're implementing them this year, and we're budgeting for sort of the ongoing licensing costs. So one of the big pieces of software that we have and we've been maintaining for a long time is our accounting software, which is called Trio. Office 365, that's where our email, our file storage and sharing sits. We have a few Adobe Pro DC licenses. We're maintaining our Zoom licenses because, obviously we're all still on Zoom, and probably will be for the foreseeable future. We have the budget to host our website through Revise, as well as the next 3, which are all new pieces of software that are going to be coming online, hopefully within the next couple of months. So one of them is eCode 360. So that's just a way more efficient way to have our ordinances and charter online. So once that is up and running, gone are the days where you have to scroll through, forward and back through a long zoning ordinance. You'll just be able to kind of click to a certain section and find, different performance standards for the zone that you're looking for them in, which will be a much better way to look at that ordinance, as well as any other ordinance that we have. Now they're all in these big, long PDFs, sort of grouped by subject matter. And pretty soon it'll be much easier to find everything and look through them and get information. So I think we're all very excited about that. And I think that the public is going to benefit most of all from that, because it's just going to be so much easier to kind of figure out where everything is. Another piece of software is iWork that the staff have been doing a lot of work to set up. So that'll be an online licensing and permitting system. So all of the, building, electrical, plumbing permits through the Planning and Development Office, you'll be able to apply for online. And the office, that office will be able to manage them online as well. So that'll be, a really good way to do that more efficiently and more transparently than we're able to do with sort of a manual paper-based system. And then another piece of software is Text My Gov. So we want to set up a system where members of the public can sign up for text notifications based on different areas of interest. So if there's, for example, a parking ban and you've signed up to receive text notifications when there's winter parking bans, it'll send that to your phone, but it's going to be available for a number of other different notifications. It also responds to inquiries. So if there's a lot of it, what it does is it sort of scrapes information off the website. And if you have, a simple question, it'll direct you to where you can find that information on the town's website. So, hopefully it'll lead to better use of that resource as well. GIS and mapping also sit within the IT budget. So vision or assessing software, as well as licenses for ArcGIS, which is, geospatial database and mapping system, as well as CAI, which is where it's kind of like a middleman between ArcGIS, which is, only a few licenses and a few departments use it, and it's not very public facing. CAI allows a lot of that geospatial data to be available online. So if you want to go and look up information on your property, whether it be your vision property card, or you want to find out sort of what zone you're in, you can go on to the CAI database, and it's a map of the town with all that information that's sort of broken down. You can search for your individual parcel. Also, support for tax and land use maps is budgeted in to this section or to this line item. And internet services, so that's basically what we pay our internet service provider for internet across the entire town, as well as hardware, which is just purchasing, new computers and other equipment. So that is the IT budget, and overall, it's going to see an 8% increase, and a lot of that is driven by the new software that we have that's up and coming, and the yearly licensing for that. A little bit in trying to sort of invest more in upgrading our GIS and mapping capabilities. All right. So before I go on, I've realized I haven't stopped at each one of these for people to ask questions. So before I go into insurances, does anybody have any questions on any of the areas that I just went over?
I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask this question now or not, Audra, but I've been concerned for a number of years over a sense that the the population in the town isn't really very aware of what goes on with town government. And that's one reason why I, with the Energy Committee, I organized those seminars at the library last spring to try and reach out to people and say, this is something you need to be concerned about. And I'm wondering if in this upgrading of various systems of software and so forth, you've given any thought, and I don't have any solution to this at all, but to a way to kind of force people to pay more attention. Some kind of an easy, you get a lot of this feedback about the McGunnicook River project is, oh, they're trying to put something over on us. And no one's trying to put anything over on anybody, but people have a hard time getting the information. So is anybody giving any thought to that at all? Or does anybody have a solution?
Oh, I mean, I'm open to any solutions. It's a real tough one, and it's funny because I had I think there were consultants that were hired by the state of Maine to talk to different community members and elected and appointed officials all across the mid-coast about offshore wind energy. And it was kind of interesting because they kept on saying, oh, so, do you know about this? It's on the state's website. It's on the state's website. I'm like, I'm really sorry. Like, I feel like I'm in your position all the time where I'm telling people, we put it on our website. We put it on our Facebook page. We put it in the paper, and people still don't know about it. And I'm just as guilty of doing it like on a state level. They try their best too to put out information, and because our websites are huge and there's a lot of content and there's a lot of, sort of competing, pieces of information, it's really difficult to, display things and, get things to people in a way that's easy to find and understandable. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Nancy. I'd love to do a better job, and I'm always looking for different ways to get information out to people. I'm really hoping that, this is something that, maybe we need to just sort of pick away at over the years, and just like any little tool that we can find to help us do that, like the text notification system.
Right.
And I mean, I don't think there's any, one thing that we're going to do that's going to solve the problem. I think it's going to be, just like a lot of little things over a long period of time and trying to be consistent.
One thing to think about, and we're thinking about future budgets, is somebody who has a position as a kind of website manager whose goal is kind of like a town crier, whose goal is to inform people. Go out there and walk up and down Main Street ringing a bell and saying, hear ye, hear ye. The McGunnicook River is flooding. Or something like that. But seriously, somebody whose job it is to, because our newspapers don't do a very good job of that. Then probably we're getting into an area where it's not appropriate to be discussing this in a budget committee meeting, but it's something I think about a lot.
No, it's a really good point. And yeah, I'm glad that you threw it out there. And by all means, I would try literally anything, because I agree with you. It's a huge issue, and it's something that, I'd love to figure out a way to do a better job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good.
Peter, are you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, but I'd like to follow up just really quickly. I think Nancy brings up an interesting point, and maybe Audra, you and Janice don't have to get into this tonight, but you really have a responsibility to, I think, tell us more about the company that was hired, and we paid what, $18,000 for the website itself. This company Revise. It's, to me, it's very misunderstood how it was introduced. It's misunderstood how we pay for it every month, and it's misunderstood. I remember you were at a select board meeting, and you were actually the web editor on occasion. So I find that place in our town government is a little awkward. I think the web information, the delivery service is amazing. Just look at some of the other towns in Maine, and you'll see some very, very, very well organized, informative websites. That's on the same idea, though, in the IT, is what is the plan, or what is the town going to do as far as this as a strategic plan? I'd like to, don't have to answer it tonight, but how are we protecting the resources of the town from internet hacking and these dark web attacks on our system? And what has the town done to protect itself, protect our assets? Is Harbor Digital, is this the service that does it? I just would love to hear a plan about that, because it doesn't take very much to go down and find a town that has been hijacked and they got caught with really not a good plan. And then last but not least, could you explain the term contracted services of Bill Kelly? I assume that just means he still have his own law practice. He's able to serve his own clients, and we are a contracted account. So maybe you could just tell me that one right off the bat.
Sure. Yeah. With Bill Kelly, yeah, he does have his own law practice still. And so we contract with him at a fixed rate. So it used to be that, prior to our agreement with the city of Belfast, we'd pay Bill like his hourly rate. Now it's a fixed yearly rate. In terms of the IT security stuff, Harbor Digital does provide that service. So that's, in that IT line for the maintenance and technical service, the $32,000 a year. That's the contract with Harbor Digital, and that's part of what they provide to us, is the security service. But that's also, through some of the software that we purchase, they provide the security as well. And when it comes to the website, so Revise is really just a platform. So it was just, updating our website was updating the platform. We're responsible for all the content and how it's organized and posting it. Revise doesn't do that. They don't create content. They helped us organize it in the beginning, but if we want to change it, that's our responsibility now. So any other IT related questions or professional services, admin, anything else? And Peter, I forgot, yeah, one thing is kind of figuring out how you want to vote on certain areas to make a recommendation as you go through it.
So would we would have voted on each line of 101, 102, 103? We should have voted on each one. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So and it's up to you how you want to do it. You can sort of wait until the end and go through everything and do it that way after everyone's presented, or take them as they come. It's really, the choice of the committee, how you want to address that.
Well, I would like to hear a couple of comments from a couple of other committee people to see. I'd like to hear if they feel comfortable right now voting on anything. Any comments? Nancy?
I don't feel comfortable voting on anything right now because I don't think we know enough about it. I mean, a couple of things, yes, but I think maybe we should have some discussion within the committee on some of these items. Not every single item on the budget, obviously, because that would take us from now until the 4th of July, but certainly some categories, okay, we think this looks terrific. I have a few questions about, there are some things that stuck out at me and I can't point to them right now, but where the budget, the line item in the budget seems to vary enormously from one budget year to another. And I'm curious about why. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but just little things like that. I don't know. Well, how did we do it last year? Did we vote on every line item? I don't think we did we?
No, so typically the budget committees voted on, for example, like the in the general government area, so like the admin and finance budget, you would take a vote on
the whole budget.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Sorry, like the page 1, you would discuss sort of any areas where you had questions or had, things that you wanted to sort of recommend for changes. And then sort of identify those and then come up with your, what you wanted to vote on for that.
Right.
And it's the same thing. You'd kind of move through, professional services to
IT
and insurances.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Peter, what do you think? Should we vote on that first page, the general government admin and finance, or what?
Well, I would like to see if we could wrap it. Let's see, what time is it?
10 after 8.
Right. Well, let's go back to, let's go now. Let's continue on and let's see if we can get through by 8:30, and we'll go down through and vote on each of the line items starting at 8:30. Do you think we can do that, Audra?
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
All right. So,
Thank you.
So moving on to insurances on page 7. So this includes, sorry, I'm going to get there myself, property and casualty insurance. So that's just sort of our general, insurance for, whether it be vehicles, property, employee bonds sit within here, other liability for public officials. So that's just increasing slightly by $3,000. Unemployment insurance sits within here, so that's increasing a little bit this year as well on the premium. The biggest single increase is workers' comp insurance, and really that's just a result of one incident, one employee, one department. We are getting our safety committee back together regularly. They had been meeting fairly regularly, but it kind of changed a little bit during the pandemic, but we're trying to really kind of raise the prominence of that. It's all department heads at this point, so that any changes that we have in terms of, health and safety related issues, we can make sure that they're implemented if we have buy-in from all the department heads. But really that it was a costly loss, and it's been, a pretty significant premium increase for FY23. And also retirees' life insurance sits within here. So, really it's the workers' comp premium that's driven the cost increase in this area. So I think that.
And that was owing to just one incident. Is that what you're saying, Audra?
One incident, one employee, and one department.
Yeah.
Yep, very costly accident.
Do you think it will go down in the following years if we don't have any more costly accidents?
Yeah, so the way that it works is it takes like a year for it to hit our premium. And then, it kind of steadily decreases over the next 3 years if we don't have any other issues.
Okay.
And we're tracking well for this year.
But Audra, but you just made a comment that there was a quote safety committee that that what fell out of meeting, what, isn't it entirely connected to trends and possible injury and mistakes? And by how could I find it fascinating that we're talking about workers' comp and you had a safety committee that didn't meet.
So I think that, the safety committee that didn't meet, a lot of it was sort of, they weren't department heads. They didn't feel like they had a lot of buy-in. I wouldn't say that that particular accident was connected to that at all. But there are certainly, other things that I think that we need to start doing better. And Dave Morrison is a really great safety committee chair and he's on top of it. So I think that, switching it over to having it be department head led has been a really good thing for making sure that it's consistent and everything is implemented. But yeah, this one accident, I would say, is not related to that, but still looking at it, definitely something that we needed to do a better job on.
Thank you.
So I do have more on the slide, but I'm going to stop sharing so that all of you can start kind of going through this and talking about it a little bit more. We'd hope to get to assessing and codes and planning tonight as well. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking so all of you can take over and go through your deliberations.
I want to ask the committee members, do they have the page? Do they have the different pages up on a screen, or do they have it printed out in front of them?
I have it printed out. I have it in the booklet that Janice gave me.
Okay, all right, good.
I assume everybody else has it?
Well, just checking. Okay, I see nodding, good. Yeah, cool, thank you.
So should we move on to the Opera House and the town office building? That's the next item on the budget.
Well, I would like to just see if anybody has any thoughts on, let's just up in 101, 102, 103, and 104. Does anyone have any thoughts on a budget number that is either in line with what Audra's proposing, less, more? Do they understand? Do they see the trend? Do they see what needs to, what's impacting what we're going to be paying for in our taxes? Does anybody have any?
I see a drop in professional development. Is that there a rationale behind that?
I think a lot of it is people being sort of reticent to just do the online trainings, and the online trainings being cheaper. So, in past years, it was for sort of in-person conferences. And I think we're a bit reticent to budget for that, not knowing what's going to happen with them.
There's a silver lining.
Audra, I do have one item that I've noticed that needs a correction for the sake of the budget committee voting. If you, on the same page down under printing, which is 01013011, it's listed proposed as $1,000 and it should be $10,000. So I've highlighted that in our budget.
What page is that, Janice?
That's on page 1.
Okay.
Would it help the committee if we screen shared a budget where, you know, Jody or I can make changes into it as it's happening?
Oh,
I don't know if that would be that helpful at this point. That's my opinion.
Well, I think if it's possible, it might be nice to see it, and that way we know exactly what we're voting on. You know, if we go for each, say, admin and finance, if we see it updated, we'll see the final number updated, that we know what we're voting on without having to all do math in our heads, I suppose. I don't know.
Okay.
But if we're not going to, if we agree with Audra's recommendations, then we could just make a motion to accept it on the whole, couldn't we? Like, I believe that's the way we handled it last year.
That's right. That's right.
So
Jody does.
If there's not further discussion on the administration and finance, I make a motion that we accept Audra's recommendation for the fiscal year 23 on the items under administration and finance.
second the motion.
Any, so that's 900, 500,000, I mean, 900,
Yes, I should have.
905.
Yes, I should have.
Is that correct?
Yes.
It would be 909,500. I've added that additional zero in under printing.
Yes.
Went from 1,000 to 10,000.
Yes.
There was a zero omitted.
Yeah. So it would be 910,500. Is that what you're saying, the total?
909,500.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? What, you know? All those in favor? One, two. Anybody opposed? Okay, there's one.
Wendy's frozen. Or Wendy, were you opposed or were you just frozen? She's.
Oh, thank you. So Audra, so one more time, explain professional services again for me. I'm mystified. So we don't really.
So that contains budget for legal services as well as engineering services.
Okay, thank you.
I move to accept the town manager's budget of $93,568.
Second the motion.
Anybody? Okay, any discussions, any problems with that? Anybody? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, that's two. Keep going. Anybody want to talk about the planning and assessor's office?
We didn't have that presentation yet, correct?
We didn't look at that.
Oh, I'm sorry. That would be fun though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yes, it would be a lot of fun.
Information technology. Can I ask a question, Audra? How long have we been doing business with Harbor Digital?
Oh, that's a great question, Peter. They were our IT provider when I started here. I believe 2010 at least.
Okay.
But I don't know the exact year.
No, that's fine.
So I'm going to ask a question about that. I'm looking at the increase in the overall budget from FY22. And it isn't that great. It's only about $10,000. I figure that is largely because of these new programs that are being installed, or however you put it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to, how do I say this? I'm going to nominate, I'm going to propose, I'm going to suggest that we accept the town manager's budget of $129,500 for information technology.
Second that.
Second that.
All right. Any discussion, any problems with anything? No? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. Well, there, we're doing it. So can we go right to insurances again, Audra?
Yep.
So we don't really have any leeway to cut insurances, do we?
Well, one thing, and I'm going to try to get this back to you as soon as I can, but I'm not sure when it's going to be ready. For our general liability insurance, we can have a plan with a higher deductible. We have an incredibly low deductible right now. So I'm just waiting on quotes for some higher deductible plans. So that's an area where we can cut. But when it comes to workers' comp, unfortunately, we have nowhere to go.
But what are our trends in our liability? What are our trends in slips and falls and claims against the town in 3 years, in 5 years? How do I know what's the proper money to spend or cut?
Well, I mean, for something like workers' comp, you really can't.
No, I wasn't talking about workers' comp. But,
you look at the budgets over the years have been, I mean, the general liability budget starts in FY19 with 7,300, and then very quickly for FY22, it's up to 61,520. I don't know what the reason for that is.
Oh, sorry. And that is a little confusing. So in FY20, we switched away from MMA to go with to bid it out on the market.
Okay.
So instead of being broken down into all those categories.
Yeah, so that's incorporating all those things that come under it in FY19.
Yeah. Yep.
Property, employee bond, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
But my hope is that that bottom line, that $75,000 premium, we can get down through having a plan with a higher deductible.
Should we wait to vote on that until you've had that information, or?
You certainly could. I don't think it would make a big difference to, to wait a few weeks.
Yeah.
So if everybody's more comfortable, you can table that and we can come back to it, hopefully when I've got more information.
Is that an agreement with everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine with me.
Thank you. So that's that. So do you want to, who goes next? What category would you like to do next?
Is that?
So I believe that Kerry has a presentation for the assessing component of the codes, planning and assessing office budget.
So we go back to that. Page 4, right?
Yes.
You all ready?
We are.
All right. Well, thank you, Audra. Thank you, Peter, and Budget Committee. Caitlin is going to do the screen share, hopefully. We rehearsed this. Uh-oh. Yep, there we go. Okay, so I thought we'd start out by telling you who we are and what we do. We'll get through that pretty quickly, I hope, and then get to something a bit more interesting. So next slide, Caitlin. I'm Kerry Lehman. I'm a CMA. And, whoop, no, back up. We should have rehearsed this a little more. And the person behind the slideshow is Caitlin Thompson. She's also a CMA.
Sorry, I tried to unmute and I just like went through 12 pages.
we watched. Okay, so you ready now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Audra cautioned us before against acronyms, so I'll tell you that CMA stands for Certified Main Assessor. And although we work for the town, we work under the authority of the state tax assessor. Camden and Caitlin and I both work for Camden and Rockport, and we've been sharing assessing services since 2014. One of the stats that I like the most is this next one. These numbers, by the way, are last year's. We don't have this year's finished. Still working through that. We actually won't have final numbers for this year until late July or even in August. But our compensation and expenses total between Caitlin and me account for 1.76% of the total town budget, but our work brings in 84% of the town's revenues. So a quick list of what we do is coming your way. Okay, so everybody knows that we inspect properties and value properties. And then we do a whole bunch of other things, some of it behind the scenes, some of it you see, but maybe you don't know that we do, like recording deeds. We edit the tax maps and update them. We deal with exemptions, we approve, process them, we approve or deny them. Same thing, we administer the current use programs. We deal with abatement requests. We issue abatements when they're warranted, and we deny them when they're not, and we defend our values at appeal hearings whenever necessary. We talk to taxpayers. We both believe very strongly that people are entitled to know how they're being taxed and why, and we spend as much time as necessary talking to people about that when they ask the question. We do an awful lot of reporting to the state and the county, filling out forms and doing reports. Some of the biggest ones we do is the main valuation report, the county property growth factor, LD1, all of this stuff takes up a lot of our day. We also value business personal property. We administer the tax relief programs associated with them. And then new this year is a property tax deferral program that we are, Nancy had mentioned about communicating to people. We're trying very hard to get the word out on this particular program because it will help seniors on a fixed income pay their property taxes. And so it's something that's new this year from the legislature. It's actually a revival of a program from the 90s that I don't know why, but it ceased. And it was brought back new and improved. And just this week, both the Courier and the Penn Bay Pilot published press releases on it. Caitlin is almost finished with a pamphlet brochure that we're going to put on the website and have available to people at the town clerk desk. It's a program that needs to be applied for by April 1st. So we're trying really hard to get the word out to people who would benefit from it. So here comes the fun part now. Audra mentioned that we would talk about how the mill rate is developed. So what we thought we would do is show you what we do to come up with the mill rate. And I mentioned that we fill out a lot of forms. This is one of them. It's called the tax rate calculator. And Caitlin is going to switch her showing from this screen to an actual tax rate calculator, which we'll fill out together, and I'll tell you what each line is about.
Yeah, I will. Just a second.
I'm sure you will. I have confidence in you.
Okay. There it is.
Okay, there it is. All right. So this is, you know, one of the things that I want to point out to folks is that what we try to do as much as possible is just deal with reality. This first line here, total taxable valuation of real estate. So every year we go out and we look at whatever new building was just built. We look at whatever improvements people made to their properties. When a large piece of land is split into other pieces, we edit the tax map and we create property record cards for that. And we have a database of the value of every property. We update it with the activities I just described. And we also issue exemptions, both everything from as simple as a homestead exemption to as complex as a total exemption of benevolent and charitable. And when it's all done, we add up those figures, we subtract the exemptions, and we come up with the total taxable value of real estate. So in this particular case, and these are last year's numbers, because we're still working on this year's. So last year, after adding up all of the property values and subtracting all of the exemptions, we had $1,337,862,000 worth of property. That's taxable property after we've deducted all of the exemptions. 000, in case you, there you go.
I was like, I forgot something.
I thought you did. Now,
Okay.
now hit enter, the commas will come in. All right. So then we also do personal property. And in personal property, what we get is equipment and furnishing inventories from all the businesses in town. We apply depreciation to that. There's a program called the BETI, which is the Business Equipment Tax Exemption Program that we administer that exempts a lot of the tax, a lot of the items that some businesses have. And so this number that we're going to put in here is minus all of that exemption. So that property was $8,183,500. So that gives us a total taxable valuation of real estate and personal property of that number you see there. So then every homestead exemptions, and again, coming back to what Nancy's point was, it amazes me whenever I talk to somebody and they never heard of the homestead exemption. When Caitlin and I go out and do inspections, we always bring with us homestead exemption forms. And we also bring veteran exemption forms. And one of the first questions we ask people are, you know, are you eligible? You know, we know whether or not people have an exemption. So we ask them, why don't you have one? And so often people tell us they don't know about it. Mm-hmm. So that's the most common exemption in town. And so this particular blank wants us to know what dollar value we gave out in exemptions on the homestead. And last year, that number was $27,286,800. Now, the state is going to reimburse us for 50% of what we're not collecting on those exemptions. So as soon as Caitlin hits enter, you're going to see that next number, 19,100,760. So that comes back to us. We're exempting 27, we're getting back 19. Same thing with Betty. The state's going to give us half of what we exempted back. And so what we exempted was $3,471,200. And Caitlin hits empty, that comes back. So we're going to get back $1,735,000. Then Audra had mentioned the appropriations. So we're just told what we're going to have to pay. So the county told us we're going to have to pay last year $1,558,482.67. The municipal budget was $10 million, 79,000. Oh, sorry.
Hold on.
Okay, go back. 1,558,482.67 cents. Okay. The municipal appropriation was $10,079,049. And that, that is the work that you're all doing now. It accumulates in that number. The TIF financing plan, that's a whole long story that could take a night to explain. So I appreciate it if you just take my word for it. That number is $228,770. There's a whole calculation that we do that comes up with that. Caitlin's got a very complex spreadsheet that she built that works very well for us. And it tells us what that number is going to be. The schools, combined schools, SAD and CSD, last year that was $12,897,375.95. So, okay, so now the total assessments, as you see right there, everything is just calculated. We're just plugging in numbers, just facts, as they say. So now we go to deductions. The state's going to give us revenue sharing. That's a budgeted number. It's always moving. And so when it comes time to create the budget, Jody makes not a projection, that the state publishes this, and she puts the closest number that she can get to in the budget. And last year that was $350,000. And then other revenues, Audra showed you a slide a while ago that showed you all of the non-property tax revenues. Last year that was budgeted to be $3,519,121. Okay, so Caitlin, if you'd scroll up, you'll see now, no, the other, I'm sorry, scroll down. Scroll down. So now what you're seeing is that the state is telling us that the minimum tax rate we're allowed to set, it's right by Caitlin's cursor, that tax rate, that actually means $15.28. The maximum tax rate we can make is $16.05. So what we do at this point now, and you look at that overlay at the bottom number, that's our guiding number. What we do, the first thing we'll do is in that yellow box, we'll put in last year's mill rate to see if we need to go up or down with it. So that mill rate was $15 and...
Do you want to start with the minimum?
Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah, put in the minimum. So the minimum tax rate that they recommend, $15.29, I guess, but 286.
Oh, what do you want? 29?
Yeah, the exact number, 15286.
Okay.
Thank you. And you see the overlay, that would give us a deficit. If we put in the maximum number, which is
terrified.
1651, so that would be $16.05. The overlay would be $1,045,000. So that's the range that we're allowed to go. The overlay is basically used for apprehension about abatements. And we try to look at the properties that we had. We try to anticipate where the trouble might be and put in a number that, because this is unbudgeted money. If we lose an abatement, that's not money that's budgeted. So we try to figure out what that's going to be. And in years that we're doing an update, where we're changing values across the town, we'll budget a lot more money in the overlay than we would on a year where there hasn't been a lot of change. So, okay, so now we'll plug in last year's mill rate, which was 15, was it 03 or 05, Caitlin, do you remember?
05.
Okay. That's this year's. Okay.
Oh, you mean
That's
last
yeah,
year?
okay, we don't have to play the game. That's, that's okay. What we came down to was a mill rate of $15.35. It gave us a conservative overlay of $87,000, and that's probably one of the most important exercises that we do. I think it'd be important to mention that we do this work totally independent of the budget process. We're going out there and we're looking at properties and we're appraising them, we're putting down values, we're doing the exemptions, we're doing abatements, we're doing everything we have to as assessors to come up with a town value. You know, Audra doesn't come to me and say, I need $10 million, go get it. We do our work. And then Audra and Jody and the department heads, and then you guys on the budget committee and ultimately the select board, you come up with a budget, and then we put them together in this form. And yeah, it's a lot. So this year, let me just, before I finish, let me tell you, we are doing another update this year. The last one we did was in 2019. Do you want to switch back, Caitlin?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'll just talk over. You get it going. I'll just keep going. We did an update in 2019, and at the time when we finished 2019, our townwide ratio was 95%, and that ratio is assessed value divided by sale price, and that 95% is every assessed value divided by every sale price. We come up with a ratio of 95. That was after the equalization we did in 2019. So when COVID hit in 2020, I'll confess to having been amazingly wrong, but along with every other assessor I know, and which was we expected the bottom to come out of the market. The real estate would just plummet. Mill rates would have to go up. It was just going to be assessing Armageddon. But what happened was an incredibly, as we've all seen, an incredibly robust real estate market. And to exemplify that, we truly at random picked a pretty average property to illustrate the point. So in 2019, when I did an update then, this was just a typical average property, and I'm for the sake of the owner, I'm going to keep that anonymous, where and who. But an average house, we have a graded average, we have the condition average, it's in a suburban neighborhood. The value of that house in 2018 was $163,600. As a result of the sales and the studies that I did in 2019, I upped that value 14% to $185,900. That same house sold in 2021 during the COVID market for $410,000. That is a 53% difference. And that ratio was 53%. And which means that the assessed value, which was $287,800 divided by $410,000, was 53%. Now we try to maintain a ratio somewhere between 91 and 100%. This is how far off it was. In 2019, this was at 95% and it dropped down to 53. And that is very much indicative of the COVID real estate market. And we don't we don't make changes right away. It's always a trend. So this happened in 2020, 2021, we did not make any changes. In 2000, now every economist that I listen to, every real estate broker that I talk to, everybody says that their opinion is that this market is not going to just drop out, that it's not an over leveraged market like we saw when the real estate bubble burst. So after 2 years of these values, and they haven't stopped yet, what's the only thing that has slowed down is the number of sales because inventory has dried up, or is not as, is drying up. So we're doing an adjustment now, and we're still working through it. But we'll gain taxable value, and hopefully that will bring the mill rate down somewhat. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
That was fascinating.
Thank you. I like talking about this stuff, but it bores a lot of people, so.
I
We
can't
present
follow the numbers, but I can see where they're going. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So Kerry, it sounds like you assess values periodically throughout, or do you anticipate doing a town-wide revaluation? I know some towns do it every 10 years, and is that like a big outside budget item that you put in the budget, or it's all built into what you do on a daily basis or yearly basis?
Well, it's both. I mean, we're constantly doing this, but the kind of revaluation you're talking about is actually a constitutional requirement that we do it at least once every 10 years. And so we are budgeting money this year. Audra and Jody created a reserve account, and we've got a 3-year reserve account, and we're gonna start on it probably start on it next year, but it'll be done in 2025. And what that is a full measuring list where people go and knock on doors and look inside and measure. And what we've been doing, it's called a statistical update, because we're actually just applying math. We're looking at sales, and we're looking at our tables and sitting in our office and doing this work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay.
Kerry.
Yeah.
Maybe this is Audra, maybe this is you, but can you explain the line 103, 101 full-time wages, and then this description down below? It's just a little bit confusing. We're up to $324,000. Why are we going up so high? What's going on?
That's assessing, planning, and codes, and I will pass that off to Audra.
Thank you.
So I think that hearing Jeremy's presentation will help flesh this out, but we're proposing a new position.
In what department?
Codes and Planning Department. So that's a big component of that.
Okay, thank you.
What is that new position going to do? Is it just going to back up Jeremy, or is it going to have new responsibilities, or what?
So a lot of it will be taking on some aspects of Jeremy's role, as well as some of Rosie's responsibilities.
Audra, one thing that's interesting to me, I think, I mean, I'm aware, having just bought another house in the town, of how real estate has soared. But what bothers me, and this is where I think the community development aspect of this comes into effect, is to walk down Main Street and up Elm Street and see so many empty spaces. And the spaces that are occupied are so different from the town as it was 10 or 15 years ago, when we had a real sense of community downtown. Now it looks like there's an awful lot of it that's just geared to the tourist trade and the seasonal trade. And I'm wondering if that comes under, I mean, I think it ought to come under community development, but I was wondering if this new person might be a person who would address him or herself to that aspect of developing the town.
So I think your questions are a really good segue into Jeremy's presentation
Good.
about, you know, that department and, you know, sort of what they do and some of their pressures. So are you all comfortable rolling into Jeremy's presentation, or is there anything else for Kerry and Caitlin?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
All right, I will quickly go try to find my presentation to share.
Oh, are you gonna do it, Jeremy?
I was going to.
Oh.
Is that all right?
I had planned on it, but by all means, please.
All right, I'll be brief. Kerry, that was awesome. That was really a very informative. Now I get it a whole lot better. So I know I'm not on the budget committee, but that was great.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, from the beginning. All right, you see it? Yeah. All right, quickly, I'll go through these. I know I heard Peter say something about 8:30 at one point. Again, Jeremy Martin, Planning Development Director. Our office, my office, and again, as Peter says, the Code and Planning Office has 3 staff people, and we coordinate the development of town, consistent with the comp plan, town ordinances, and state law. We provide planning and zoning services. We conduct building plan reviews and inspections. And then, as Nancy mentioned, we do some community economic development functions, try to provide that. Audra said earlier about how, and again, I'm trying to, let me see, I'm losing this. I don't want to stay on this for too long. We administer the town's ordinances and the state mandated building code. And I think part of this increase or the desire or need for a new position is part of the, not only this new building code requirements, which require a lot more inspections on buildings. That's a piece of it. We process a whole host of permits, from building permits to sign permits to special exceptions to subdivision and site plan reviews. Provide technical support to the zoning board and the planning board. We respond to zoning, building, and housing complaints and concerns, and we provide customer service to property owners, real estate agents, developers, builders, design professionals on zoning and land use and building codes and permitting. Again, I serve as the town planner right now. I provide technical support and expertise to the planning board and the ZBA. And a lot of the work that we've been doing on the planning board this year has been work on zoning amendments. And those amendments have been geared towards trying to address some of the comp plan goals and recommendations, as well as some of the select board's priorities. Last in November, went to voters. We did a couple of amendments that voters approved. One was off-street parking amendments in the downtown. We were trying to facilitate reuse of downtown buildings, and that passed overwhelmingly by voters. And then to address housing, or to try to facilitate housing, Kerry said the market has dried up, and Jill would probably attest to it. It has dried up. There's not much on the market. We're having a housing crisis up and down the coast. So we did amend open space zoning to hopefully facilitate some housing. And this year we worked on erosion control, a handful of shoreland zoning amendments that are required to be consistent with state law, and a number of amendments to, again, increase housing opportunities in the village and village extension districts. We're looking at reducing lot sizes and allowing some changes to non-conforming structures. We also work on the comp plan, try to implement that, amend it as needed, and update it as required by state law. One of the other things we've been trying to work on is climate change, sea level rise, resiliency planning, and adaptation. That part of that is also floodplain management. And I'll quickly go to community development and economic development. We've participated in implementing the downtown master plan, pedestrian improvement projects, looking at the public landing, climate change and sea level rise, the tannery cleanup and redevelopment, Sagamore Farm, Again, ordinance developments to facilitate comp plan goals, work with Ragged Mountain folks at the Snow Bowl, the Land Trust and McNemba, for instance, which is the Mid-Coast Mountain Bike Association, on trying to develop the Snow Bowl into a year-round facility, more than it is currently. And then we'll also work with Cabbage, the Camden Area Business Group, and we have been working for the past few years with the Maine Outdoor Film Festival, bringing a film festival, outdoor recreation type festival to Camden, which has been great. Well, am I going backwards now? I must, sorry about that. Special projects this year, finally getting under construction that I helped work on. We did, and voters about a year ago now, I guess it was, voted to take some property for eminent domain on a property on 105 on Washington Street, and that was to facilitate a sidewalk project going from Matthew John out to Shirtail. That construction is scheduled to happen this year. Working on the US EPA brownfield cleanup at the tannery. That is anticipated and needs to be completed by the end of September this year. I participated in a downtown parking management program or study that's been going on for this last many months. And I work on trying to implement town and select board goals and priorities. Again, housing affordability and availability is a big one. And climate change and sea level rise as well as comp plan amendments. Those are all in progress, and we have not made the type of strides and progress in that as I would like, nor I think as the town kind of demands, to be honest with you. And that is primarily has to do with, I think, our workload. Audra mentioned it earlier. Fees are up 60% that we brought in. Our permit activity over the last 4 years has almost doubled, from 386 permits to 666 permits. And that does not even include special exceptions and site plans and those kinds of things and subdivisions that get reviewed and approved and approved. And the market is absolutely crazy. Construction activity is through the roof. There's no sign that that's going to change. And again, part of our work is, yes, permits are up. That demands a lot more of our time on reviews. It just for so people know when someone wants to build a house, it takes about a week to 2 to sometimes 3 weeks to review those building plans, to then ultimately issue a permit. And all of the new inspections that are required, whether it be energy, foundation, electrical, all that, those are all ramping up as well. We also have new shoreland zoning inspection requirements that are in place. There's an amendment again going to voters this year in June to that's required. We're going to have to monitor and track photographs over time on projects that are permitted. That's a new state requirement. And yeah, and so that's all been ramping up. I will say that I've gone to the select board recently to try to increase our fees, and we're working on increasing our fees. One of the, again, because I believe that applicants should pay for the services that we're providing as much as possible. The Zoning Board of Appeals and Planning Board, their work is up. I've heard from at least a dozen very large projects in the shoreland zone that are looking to expand. Those go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's a very complicated and technical process that has to take place. And the board is a lay board. So they're, it's every time something comes to them, it's brand new in essence. So there's a lot of technical work that has to go on behind that. Planning Board, again, is ramping up to address the comp plan, looking at sea level rise. I will say the comp plan was approved in 2017. We need to start getting ready to update that again, or at least amend it pretty rapidly. Climate change is not referenced in the comp plan at all, and that was done in 2017. So we're working to do that. Part of that is addressing height issues as well, and floodplain management requirements on finished floor elevation. So it's very complicated stuff. I have not been able to spend nearly the amount of time that the work demands because I'm been roped up in all of these shoreline zoning reviews, the site plan reviews, quite extensively. It's taking a lot of time. Again, the permit activities doubled in 4 years. As Kerry was saying, he was thinking that the market was going the other way. I kind of have anticipated it going this way, and it's like, it's not stopping. And there are people buying homes and renovating them, gutting them and renovating them all over the place. And it's happening, and it's going to create value, but it creates a ton of work on our end. And so that's kind of my presentation. And so what we are proposing is a assistant CEO, land use planner / land use planner, if you will. And that person would assist in shoreline zoning reviews, land use work, zoning and planning board. And again, assistance for me in developing planning studies and reports and working on the comp plan, which would then facilitate me to do kind of more higher level planning, as well as community and economic development work. Audra mentioned previously about the highway TIF needs to be addressed. Someone needs to do that. I think we've talked about doing that for the last year or two. We just haven't gotten around to it because there's been so much on our plates. Hence, and again, ordinance development and comp plan updates. Hence the reason for a proposed new position. And it is an entry-level land use planner CEO position so that they can do inspections and they can assist me in the planning work. And again, right now we have 2 full-time people and a part-time 30-hour position. Jeannie Hollingsworth is the code and planning assistant, and Rosie Curtis is the code officer and plumbing inspector. And Rosie and I are both full-time positions. I will say Jeannie also helps the assessing office a fair amount. She's kind of the face of the office when people come into our space. Rosie and I are both members of the Maine Building Officials and Inspectors Association. We're both certified code officers. I'm a member of the State Building Codes and Standards Board that regulates and develops building codes for the state, member of the Maine Planning Association and the New England chapter of the American Planning Association, the International Code Council. I am part of the Maine Adaptation Providers Network, which is looking at climate change and sea level rise. And Rosie is also a licensed architect. That's who we are and what we do. Certainly here to answer any questions, if not today, at any time. That's what I have for you. Audra, I don't know if you wanted to chime in or say anything else.
I guess I would add that, there's been sort of a lot of, focus on emergency services personnel and the impact of COVID and increased workload. But I really can't emphasize enough that there is no single department that's been impacted by the COVID economy more than planning, codes, and development. And it's just their workload has escalated to a point where it's frankly unsustainable for the number of people that we have right now. And we really don't have any hope of doing, the higher level planning or economic and community development work for the town without additional resources. Because, for better or worse, Jeremy has a background as a code enforcement officer and somebody who's, overseen large code enforcement offices in the state of Maine. So it's just impossible for him not to get roped into some of the more complex, code related issues that we have in the town of Camden, whether it be, shoreland zoning, or if there's, a real sort of significant issue with some sort of, enforcement action that the town needs to take. So, Jeremy's really, it's been wonderful in one regard, in that is really important work that the town is, really, required to do, and having Jeremy there to do it has been really important. And it also allows Rosie to continue with sort of the day-to-day, permitting work that needs to happen to keep that office functioning. But the consequence of it is that there's just a lot of, long-term planning that we haven't been able to do, implementation of the comp plan that we haven't been able to do, and, some of the community development work that Nancy brought up that we haven't been able to focus on in the manner that we want to and need to, and that the community deserves. So that's the rationale behind the additional position.
So that additional position is reflected in the increase in full-time wages, I take it, yeah?
Yes.
But so specifically, what is this position going to, what is that wage going to be for this new person? How much?
So that would be, it's, we work in the pay grade. So it would be a grade 17. Do you want to give the range of that, Jody? Do you have that at your fingertips?
I do. Grade 17, hourly, I can do both. Hourly starts at $30.81 an hour and peaks out at $41.40 an hour based on experience and years of service, which would equal out to be a span of $64,000 a year, all the way up to $86,000 a year. That would be for a full-time position.
Okay. Thank you.
I would add that that's right in line with other wages that people are making in this field, Peter.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
I hope that the addition of another person might mean that we could move ahead with some of these long-standing discussions, like developing the snowball into a year-round facility and the tannery problem and Sagamore. What about Sagamore? At one point it was discussed as some kind of low-income housing, and at another point it was going to be a big solar field. Is there any kind of sense of where we're going with the Sagamore farm?
I mean, really quickly, Nancy, maybe I'll touch base on it and then Audra can chime in. You know, the select board did ask me to develop an RFI, or request for information or interest in the property. And we got, not a lot of interest, but we did get some interest from some housing developments. And then I think, to be honest, I think it was everything just spiraled. It was COVID was happening and our workload just ramped up. And I think, a lot of committee demands at the same time. And I think the select board said, well, let's put the brakes on this for now. But I fully intend, I did get an inquiry recently from somebody who did submit a proposal and asked what was happening because they're interested again. And I said, it's my hope that we can get that back to the select board at some point in the new year to start talking again about it. It's just the workload, our plates got very, very full, and it requires somebody to do that work. And while I'm doing everything else, it's very hard to do that other work.
Thank you, Nancy. But in the interest of moving forward, that was great, Jeremy. Thank you.
Sure.
Does anybody have any problem with making a motion?
I just have one question. I mean, I understand the full-time wage. I fully support the need to hire somebody, and obviously then insurance goes up and all the other line items related to that. I just had a question. It looks like the one other thing that really jumped up quite a bit was assessing office supplies. It went from 500-ish to 13,650. So I just wanted to know what was in that number.
We're going to, that's actually half the expense that we're going to share with Rockport, an inspection device. It's an iPad system that will tie right into our CAMA, another acronym, Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. It'll go right into our system so that when we're out in the field, we'll be able to do our inspections without having to do any office follow-up. It's going to make us a lot more efficient. So that's the system itself is, I'm not going to remember exactly, but about $24,000. And we're going to share that expense with Rockport and use it in both towns.
Okay, sounds good. And I just had one note just to say, maybe when you present this to the select board, that to add in the notes, you mentioned you removed a building inspector. position, but you don't explain that you're adding. So it really doesn't explain what that increase is when you're kind of looking through this.
I saw that earlier, Jill, and I thought I had deleted that already, and I crossed it out on my copy, that's paper copy that's sitting right here. So will do.
Great. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, if there's no further questions, I'll make a motion that we accept the town manager's proposed budget for the planning, codes, development, and assessing departments.
I'll second that.
Okay, wow. Any further discussion, comments, criticisms? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
It is 9:15.
So Audra, I have a suggestion that we deal with line 106, the town office building. And we put the last three, 301, 303, and 304 onto next Thursday. And I've had a couple of messages already sent to me from from members, and I will attempt to try to review and try to get some headway on those items so that we can kind of move a little faster. I apologize for being so slow. What do you think about that? Can we do this, the town office?
Yep, works for me, and Dave Morrison's here to explain that, and it shouldn't take long.
Is that in agreement with everybody else? Is that
Yes.
cool?
Very much so.
Thank you. Take it away, Dave.
Thank you, Peter. As you probably know, this building, the town office and the Opera House, in a budget sense, is divided into two budget lines. A 106 is basically the first floor / town office, and the upper two floors and the theater are a 107, which will be on a different night. So 0106 is really just the nuts and bolts of the town office. And the way I look at it, it's kind of divided into three things. One is wages and benefits, one is utilities and facility related things, and one is more like purchases. The utilities are electricity, heat, water and sewer, HVAC, the sprinkler system, security services, which is the fire alarm. And all of those are split 50-50 with the Opera House. So that's how these are laid out. So I think if you look at page 8, you'll see that there's very little change on some of the lines. I actually tried to reduce it a bit. The main change, and Jody can explain this better than I perhaps, but has to do with the custodian. The custodian is shared half and half with the Opera House. And when COVID hit, we were actually in between. We had just hired a new custodian because the former person had left. And so in the interest of frugality, we made that position a part-time one because we anticipated that the need in the Opera House would be much less. And so we've been working with that. And my staff has been doing all the cleaning in the Opera House because of the fact that the custodian was cut down. And so now, and we have a very excellent custodian, which is something we value because it's not always the case. It's a surprisingly hard position to fill. So we would like to restore that position to a full-time position. And that is the increase in wages and benefits. So I'm happy to answer any questions. A lot of this is fairly self-explanatory, cleaning supplies and building maintenance and that sort of thing. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. And Jody, if I've missed anything, please feel free to fill in.
Well, I'm rushing to say I am stunned at the full-time wages of $33,800 a year. How much time do you put into that, Dave? I mean, this includes your salary, right?
No.
The full-time wages are the assistant manager, who's Juniper, who does a lot of work for the select board, and the AV and the French conference room. So it's 25% of her salary and 50% of the custodian. Is that correct, Jody?
That's correct.
Okay.
So how much are these people making? Are they, I mean, it just, when you look at the cost of housing around here, it just seems to me like an awfully low budget operation. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be trying to get the town budget down, but in this case, I'm wondering if it doesn't need to be increased.
Well, in the case of the custodian, Jody can tell you with the step and grade, our particular custodian at the moment is fairly new. So that puts him lower on the step part of it. Mm-hmm. And the custodian position is either a grade 5 or 6, Jody. It's
He's actually a grade 7.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And that the entry level wage starts at $18.91 an hour, and it tops out at $25.42 an hour. So our custodian is fairly new at his trade. So he's lower on the scale.
But Nancy, you might be missing that Dave is only talking about the about the town office.
Okay.
So remember, he's got a whole nother budget.
All right.
So
yeah, there's another side of that, of his.
It's right. So we're only getting the town office, but I just want to make a comment that many times we've seen in Camden over 3 or 4 years, we seem to think it's great to share an employee or share this. We do this robbing Peter to pay Paul many times, and it may look good in a pinch, but I think many times it ends up costing. It costs employee retention, and it costs. Well, anyway, I just think it's a very hard act. So I think it's great that you found an employee and then you've hired them. And it's impacting the budget, and we're going to pay for it. But like Nancy said, I think you're doing a great job, Dave. So I would support this the whole way.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I barged in. Does anybody else have any comments, criticisms? Does it make sense?
No, I'm going to move that we accept the town manager's budget of $100,100 for Opera House Town Office Building.
All right, I'll second it.
Any discussion, comments, problems? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you. So that leaves us 3 large, very interesting items to talk about at the beginning of the meeting next Thursday. Is that correct? We're still going to start at 6:30, right?
Yep, unless you all want to change it. But otherwise, we'll start at 6:30. And yes, I can roll right into sort of the capital reserves and what the part that was sort of left off this. Or I could go right into, I think, as a public safety people presenting. And then, whatever your preference is, it really doesn't matter one way or the other in terms of that order.
Well, like I said to you earlier, Audra, if any of the department heads would want to send those PowerPoints to us, even if half of us look at them, it would help at least familiarize those people that look at them with what's going to be said, and possibly we can move along a little quicker. Just a suggestion. So barring that, I would say we're all done for tonight. Anybody else have anything they need to say or do? Then we'll close it for tonight. Is that okay?
Excellent.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Audra.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good night.